This is Cars and Bids, and today we are talking BMW M3. We are one of the biggest online sellers of BMW M3s. As of this video, we have now auctioned 130 BMW M3s, and there are more on the way. And I want to discuss some interesting trends I'm noticing in the BMW M3 world. So let's go. Okay, so like I said, we've had a lot of M3s on Cars and Bids, and we have a really sharp idea, therefore, of the market. So I want to discuss some of the interesting market trends that I've seen watching these sell over the last year and a half. So let's get going. First one, E9X, which is kind of the enthusiast term used to describe the 08 to like 2015 M3, the one with the V8. E9X because it was E90 as a sedan, E91 as a wagon, E92 as a coupe, and E93 as a convertible. So X is just used as a catch-all. These cars are getting big money, surprisingly big money. We recently sold a Lime Rock E92 M3 for almost $60,000. Now, that was a special edition, but big money is even happening for some of the regular ones. We got $36,000 for a 2008 M3 convertible, which is a strong number, especially for a first-year model and a convertible, which historically has brought less money in the M3 world. And check this out, we got $36,000 for a 2012 M3 coupe with an automatic transmission, which is really impressive. It's mostly the manuals bring the big money, but for these, we're starting to even see big money with the autos. Now, the interesting thing here, obviously $36,000, $59,000, it's not like we're talking about these cars are 200 grand, but they are pretty expensive. And to me, the most interesting part is they never really got cheap. E46 M3s, the one that came before, there was a period where they were cheap, like seriously cheap. 8 to 10 grand would buy a lot of them. But E90, E92 M3s never really got into that range. And now they're already starting to come back up. They're already starting to peak collector interest and gain more money. So what is going on? There are a few factors here at play that I think driving the E9X M3 market higher. One of them is, of course, the naturally aspirated V8. You know, BMW M cars sort of hit a pinnacle in the mid to late 2000s. They put an NA V8 in the M3, and then they put a V10 in the M5 and the M6, and it was a crazy decision. And after that, obviously, they've now gone with turbo 6-cylinders. They have more power, but there's a special thing about a naturally aspirated V8 that is starting to become more and more desired in the car world as these cars age. And I think that NA V8 thing, people know it's going away, electric cars are coming, turbo cars are coming, and that has propelled these M3s higher. But there's more to it than just that. For one thing, the manual transmission. An NA V8 is a cool old school feature of a car, but when paired with a manual transmission, another cool old school feature of a car, those two things collide and really, really make for a desirable car. And that's why the manual E90 and E92 M3s are really especially desirable. But it's not just that. I think there's more to it. For one thing, I think that to some people, to many people in the M3 crowd, the newer models are just not quite as desirable. The next generation M3 and M4, they're heavier, they're bigger. They're better cars in a lot of ways, but they're more luxurious, more screen, more, tech and equipment and features, and not everybody really wants that. And I think that a lot of M3 people are starting to realize that the E9X cars were sort of a special moment in time when the cars still had big power and they were still very driver focused, but they hadn't yet transitioned into this age of more luxury and more equipment. So there's a lot of desirability there because the later cars in some senses haven't quite measured up. Then there's one more factor I think that comes into play here, which is rod bearing problems. These cars specifically, the E9X M3s, they had some engine issues, and you can solve them, and it's expensive to solve them, but if you do, you get more money for your car because it tells potential buyers that it's an issue that they don't have to think about anymore. And it's kind of interesting because the rod bearing issue is a pricey one to fix, like I mentioned, but you get back either as much as you put in or maybe even sometimes more when you go to sell a car. It just telegraphs to buyers, hey, you don't have to put up with this, you don't have to think about it, your engine isn't gonna explode, and people are paying up for that. And so not only are these E9X M3s desirable for the V8 and the manual, but even if you have questions about the longevity of the V8, there are fixes that can be done, and cars with those fixes are bringing great money. Okay, next M3 market trend I want to discuss is E46 M3s. And the market report that I'm surprised to announce here is that there are still deals to be had in the E46 M3 world. These cars have gone way up in value, these E46 M3s, and we've sold some for some big money. We got $55,000 for a manual with super low miles back in September. We got almost $44,000 for a manual 2006 M3 competition in July, and that was with 70,000 miles. So E46 M3s are going up, and there are some expensive ones. But I predicted a few years ago in a video that these cars specifically would rise like crazy in the collector and enthusiast market. And some have, but you can still get into one for reasonable money. And indeed, there are also cheap E46 M3s. Automatics tend to be cheaper, convertibles tend to be cheaper, with automatic convertibles, of course, being the cheapest at all. But those may not be quite as desirable as like a low mileage manual coupe, but it's still a very cool car that you can buy for like $15,000 still, with higher miles, or $20,000 in decent shape with a manual and around 100,000 miles. That still exists. 20 grand for a car like that, for this analog BMW experience, a car that's gaining in value, it doesn't seem like that huge of money considering what it is. Now, with these cars, you do have to budget for servicing. The powertrain was, I don't want to say unreliable, it just is you got to stay on top of stuff. It's a maintenance hog, and you got to really think about that when you're buying one of these cars. And I think that's kept values artificially low to some extent. But the point still remains that you can get one of these for relatively reasonable money, even as super high quality concours examples have gone crazy in price. It's refreshing and interesting to see that, you know, 15, even 12 grand will still buy you one of these with higher miles and maybe some needs that you can mess with and repair and fix and get nice. Also worth noting that manual swaps for E46 M3s are possible. And they do bring more. We've sold, I think, 6 manual swap E46 M3s on Cars and Bids. They bring more money than if they just had the automatic. I'm not sure if you get all the money back from doing the swap, but the point is that it's possible, and so don't count out an automatic car just because it's an automatic. The swaps are not only possible, but they're becoming fairly common. Now, finally, last thing I want to discuss with M3s, new ones, brand new 2022 models are not doing that insanely well in the market. Right now, all desirable cars are getting sold with markups. Frankly, almost all cars are getting sold with markups. I'm hearing about markups on RAV4s and Highlanders and regular Jeeps and everything. And that's true of the M3 and the M4 also. They are also getting sold with markups right now. The chip shortage, credit is cheap, there's a lot of demand, etc. But I am not hearing it quite as much as I expected to for the M3s and the M4s. C8 Corvettes, when they first came out, were going for like $40,000 to $50,000 over for a long time, over the sticker price. Broncos were doing $30,000 over. TRXs, GT500s, all these cars were bringing big, big money. Mercedes G-Wagons are still bringing like $100,000 over. There's a ton of demand. The new M3 is selling for over sticker right now in a lot of places, but from what I've seen in the market, they're not selling for that much over sticker, especially considering that basically everything is a little bit over sticker right now. I'm not exactly sure why this is. I personally love the new M3. I think it's a fantastic car, and I think it's one of the best M3 models ever made. I think it drives well, but it is pricey. There's no question about that, and I think that that may be putting off some people, and it is very polarizing styling. The front end design has been discussed a lot with regards to that car, and I wonder if that is also turning off some potential buyers as well. But either way, what I'm seeing with the current brand new M3 in the market is it is not quite doing as well as I expected relative to other cars that should also be in similar high demand, which is interesting. We'll see how those M3s age as they go. But there you go. That is a BMW M3 market report. We love M3s here on Cars and Bids. We've done incredibly well with them. We've sold an enormous amount of them, and we hope to have many, many more. And those are a couple of interesting M3 trends that I'm seeing from recent sales.